Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Take Charge of Your Vertical, How to Be a Thought Leader. My name is Megan Mao and I will be moderating today's webinar. I work as a consultant services advisor and help those interested in joining the MBO community understand how our services work and decide whether we'd be a good fit for you or not. I'd quickly like to introduce MBO Partners to those of you who are not already familiar with our services. We provide back office services to make it easy for independent professionals and their clients to work together. We do this by offering services such as personal business managers, business insurances, retirement plans, educational resources, and tax help, just to name a few. Here are some quick tips on using GoToWebinar. You can maximize the presentation on your screen by clicking the full screen icon. You can also submit questions in the text box you see here. I'm going to go ahead and answer a question we get during most webinars and let you know that we will be emailing a copy of the slides and the webinar recording early next week. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. As a special bonus, the first person to ask a relevant question will receive a copy of Denise's new book, Ready to Be a Thought Leader. We will announce the winner at the end of the webinar and our team will reach out to you for your address. If you're a Twitter user, please note that we will be live tweeting today using the hashtag MBOWeb. Feel free to join in the conversation online or submit questions or comments via this channel. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Denise Brosseau. Denise is the CEO of Thought Leadership Lab, a boutique professional services firm which specializes in building the thought leadership of executives and CEOs with the goal of increasing their market visibility and generating strategic connections. She has years of experience as a strategic speaker, advisor, and most recently author. Denise also co-founded Springboard, the prestigious women's startup launchpad that has led over $6 billion in funding for women entrepreneurs in 1999 and continues to serve as advisory role for the organization. Denise?
So nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I wanted to start off by just being happy to be here with all my peeps, other consultants out in the world, and I thought we'd start off with a quick poll. So let's launch this, and I really want to ask folks to jump in right from the very beginning and say, what is your status today? You don't know what a thought leader is, because that's always the first question. I want to be a thought leader in my vertical, but I'm not really sure how. I then identified goals that will help me become influential, and maybe becoming a thought leader is not a top priority. So let me hear from you. Where are you on the categories here? I think this is important to begin our day together, and I want to make sure we answer all of these questions and get to all of these different points here. So I'm seeing a lot of good input. Thank you for jumping in to everyone. The goal today is to do a little describing of thought leaders. So let's start with that. Let's close the poll. I think what we've seen here is the second category. I want to be a thought leader, but I don't know how. And then we also have about 21% who don't know what a thought leader is. So we're going to jump in on this first question by sharing 3 quick stories with you. The first one is a gentleman named Ron Finley who calls himself the Gangster Gardener. He's in South Central LA. Years ago, he started growing a garden in his front yard, and he quickly got a notice from the city when his fruit trees and his vegetable garden was on city property. And he said, like many folks who were trying to make change in the community, he got a notice and he said, stop, take that garden out. And many of us do get those notices from our boss or from others around us saying change is not possible. But he didn't get stopped. He actually started a petition, and he began a journey around going from having one garden in his front yard to having gardens all over South Central LA, in homeless shelters and in abandoned lots. And he started a TED Talk, and he's created a whole movement around growing gardens in abandoned properties, but really it's about food and organic food for kids and getting kids to grow gardens. And I have a story of Adrienne Ott of Exponential Edge. She started her career in HP and built a many years career there and stepped out to become a consultant like many of us. And she then discovered that, working as she did, working mostly with folks who were just like her from her past companies, wasn't really that exciting over time. She really decided to create a real specific strategic niche for herself, and she developed a new way of thinking around the customer and what she calls the 24-hour customer, and she invented this concept called timeonomics and created a whole movement and book and following around this idea of the 24-hour customer and how to really serve that group. So that is another story of somebody who has really become a thought leader in her niche. And then we have Von Tone-Quinlivan. Von was at PG&E, the Pacific Gas and Electric, our local utility, 100-year-old company, and she instituted a brand new program which was really for the first time to bring diversity to their hiring practices, and then took that program and scaled it across her industry, started really getting recognition as a speaker and testifying in front of the U.S. Senate and recognized by the White House, and then headhunted by the governor of California to run a program like this across the entire state in the community college system. Each of these people, I'm telling each of these stories because they are all different kinds of thought leaders. They're thought leaders in communities, they're thought leaders as consultants, they're thought leaders in companies. And all of us have a chance, actually, to be any of those people. We can help our clients who are in companies become thought leaders. We can help people in our community or make change in our community and become thought leaders. And we, of course, as our own and consultants, we can become thought leaders. So we're going to talk a little bit about that journey and how do you do that. So I identify thought leaders as people who begin as change agents. And they are people who often inspire us with new ideas, new programs, new projects, new initiatives, and or they pull ideas from those around them. As consultants, we often find initiatives from people who are our clients. And then we actually create innovation in whatever our community is and whatever our niche is. And then we scale and we replicate those ideas. So as a consultant, we have this chance of taking ideas from one client to another and being able to replicate and scale change across industries because of our unique ability to see multiple organizations. We also then, as a thought leader, want to build a community of people who follow our ideas and follow what we think. And then we have the ability to influence sustainable change. So all of those, I think, are the steps to being a thought leader. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what does that mean for us. But let's just start. I want each of you to take out a piece of paper. This is not one of those sit back and watch and maybe this will be something I think about 20 years from now. I really kind of hope that you're going to come away with a few ideas. So just start by jotting down an idea of someone in your community, someone in your industry, someone in your niche who really is a thought leader or a change agent that you admire. Maybe it's someone at one of the companies that you work with. Maybe it's someone that you've worked with before or someone that you've read about. But I think thought leaders and change agents are all around us. And I think if we can identify these folks as role models, then we have a chance to actually model ourselves on some of them. So what I believe with thought leaders is that it begins with internal. So internal to a company or an organization, internal to a niche. Then often people build a peer network of others across their field, and then they leave an impact across their industry, across their state or their region or nationally. That's the idea of thought leadership, is about scaling your impact. Let's talk about why you might want to be a thought leader. I mean, you all jumped on this webinar and you took an hour out of your busy day, and I know we're all very busy with all the different things going on in our lives. So I really think about thought leadership as having a couple of different dimensions. I think thought leadership can bring you more influence. It certainly can bring you more impact. It can often bring you more income. And most of my clients tell me that it also helps them to leave a legacy that matters. But I also think, more than anything, of it as career insurance, especially as a consultant. When we think about ourselves in building a practice, we really need to have a niche. We need to have people who know what we are the go-to person in. And so it becomes a career insurance in that we become that person that everybody calls when they need advice or consulting in a certain specific area. If we're too general, we don't have that career insurance. If we are too specific. Maybe we've narrowed ourselves too specifically to maybe 3 companies who might want our expertise. So there is a fine line here. But I think of thought leadership and this ability to be known as that go-to person as career insurance. Here's what it isn't. Here's what it isn't. It isn't about being a show-off. It isn't about being a braggart or a self-promoter or a grandstander. It is instead really about making a difference. So people often shy away from this concept of thought leader because they think that, oh, I don't want to toot my own horn, I don't want to oversell myself. But, you know, I go back to that Walt Whitman quote that says, if you've done it, it ain't bragging. And the reality is we have done a lot of things. We wouldn't be hired as consultants if we didn't have some knowledge and expertise. So I want you to imagine yourself as a thought leader, as somebody who is sharing your expertise. To me, the difference between an expert and a thought leader is that experts are all about telling you what they know and really kind of tooting their own horn for the sake of making themselves sound smarter. But thought leaders are about making others smarter. And as consultants, we have that ability to be in front of people and helping demystify and clarify information in a way that helps them. And that's what I think is really important. So what might be holding you back? Let's take another quick poll here. What might be holding you back from this? You know, I just outlined these steps to thought leadership, and we're going to dig in more on them. But let's take a poll here quickly on what is it that holds people back from being a thought leader. Maybe it's, I don't know, I'm too busy, I don't have time, there's no way I could do this, or I don't have the appropriate skill set. I don't have enough confidence in my abilities, or I'm not sure if thought leadership will help me find a job or get promoted. Or maybe there's nothing, I'm on my way. And I'm seeing a lot of folks jumping into that category, which I'm hoping. But I do see that there's time is often one of the things that holds people back. And that is a common phrase. I like to share the story with Von Quinlivan, the person I shared earlier. She was one of my clients. You know, she became a thought leader in her own niche with 2 small children at home and a busy corporate career. So I don't believe that it is only a time conversation. So let's close the poll. I think we've got a good showcase here. We've got 31% say I don't have time, 8% say I don't have the skill set, 31% say I don't have enough confidence, and 12% said they're not really sure that thought leadership would help them. So I think that these are all valid, but I love the 19% who say nothing. I'm on my way. So let's jump into some of these pieces of the conversation about being too busy. I like to share a little bit about my own background and why it is that I'm here talking to you. I actually became an accidental thought leader. That's me there on the left with my friend Jennifer Jo Roberts. I started a nonprofit here in the Bay Area called the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs in 1993 while I was working full-time in technology. And I started this organization, quote unquote, on the side. And for 5 years, we built a real community around this issue of women and venture capital. How could we get women entrepreneurs to raise more venture capital by understanding what was possible for them? And that was all well and good, and we had a couple of chapters underway in different cities. And then one day I got a call from this group in Washington around, what if we started the first venture capital conference for women entrepreneurs? And I said, yes, let's do that. And that is what really led me to becoming a thought leader. I became one of 3 or 4 people in the United States who was really this go-to person in the world of women's economic empowerment around venture capital. And that's the day, one of the happiest days of my life, when we're on the NASDAQ floor shouting and screaming when we took Constant Contact public. Springboard has helped lead to over $6 billion in financing for women-led businesses over 12 years. And that journey has really taught me how important it is to really understand what your niche is and showcase your expertise and build your platform in that world. And now I work with individuals about that same journey, you know, from leader to thought leader. How do you amplify your impact, multiply your influence? How do you leave that legacy that matters? And as was mentioned, I just finished writing a book. It just came out a few weeks ago on Ready to be a Thought Leader. And in this book, it's sort of the step-by-step process that anyone can take, the 7 steps that I've outlined that I follow with my clients, that others that I interviewed followed. Really, how do you do this? So I want to jump into these 7 steps, and I'm really trying to take from the book all the different ideas that are really specifically for you as consultants. What do you need to be focused on? So let's jump into the first chapter. So chapter 1 is about finding your driving passion, and I've mentioned it a little bit before. It is this critical component about finding your niche. So I have this exercise in the first chapter and this first chapter is all about this idea of identifying your thought leadership intersection point. And it is a actual step-by-step process to do this. If you haven't already identified and honed your niche, I'm hoping that this section will actually help you, because we really need to have both something we're committed to and passionate about, but also something we have the credibility and the experience to back up, or that we can develop those sort of reasons to believe that we are the person. Now, one thing I wanted to do, since you guys are all my peeps here, the people that I most affiliate myself with as consultants, I'm actually going to share with you some worksheets that I'm got that come right with the book, or that don't come in the book, that I'm developing as a side piece. And we're going to send you those worksheets after this talk. So if you registered for the talk, you're going to get an email in a week or so with a replay of this and a couple of worksheets. And the worksheet really takes you step by step through finding your own niche, figuring out what trends you align to, and also thinking about what's the future you're trying to bring about in your industry and for your clients. So I think this is a really critical component. So thinking to yourself, what is it you could do to hone your niche and assure that you're relevant and unique? This is a question I hope you'll answer for yourself in this next couple of days, not wait 2 more years to think about this, but really imagining that you could take a moment and look at your experience, look at your credentials, look at your expertise, and look at what you care about, and identify the niche that you want to be known as if you haven't already done so. I'm guessing many of you might have already taken this step. So let's move on. The second step in the book is really about building your ripples of influence. And this is, of course, very relevant because we have to begin somewhere with our ideas. But I look at consultants as having some real opportunities in this step in the process, because we have an ability to amplify, to curate, and to convene. So what do I mean by that? Amplify is an ability with all the ideas that we hear. We sort of have our ear to the ground in so many different worlds, because as consultants we get to be as part of a lot of different conversations. Being able to amplify the message of our clients, of the ideas that our client companies are working on, that is a gift that we have, because we can take those ideas to other companies. We can be out speaking and writing about what they're doing because we actually have that 3,000 foot level. So we have an ability to amplify. We also have an ability to curate, and our clients really look to us for that. Being able to curate information that they need and giving them that email newsletter, or giving them that quick note every morning, once a week or every other week, we send them a newsletter article that it might interest them, or giving them an upcoming event that might be of help to them. I think that role of curator is really critical in the influence. And then the third is really around convening. As a consultant, because we have these connections, we can convene in our industry in a niche, and being able to bring our clients together who are sharing similar challenges, that's a really critical role. So let me share a story of Adrienne that I mentioned earlier. Adrienne began her path to thought leadership as a convener. She actually began to bring some of her clients together early in her consulting career. She created this sort of a gathering place for her consulting clients to come and share their ideas and share their problems and share their best practices. This allowed her to have an ear to the ground in a really interesting challenge that was being faced by all of them, which was trying to get noticed by their clients and customers because people were so busy. And so that's when she, having this sort of ear to the ground about the trends and having that seat at the table, which she had actually convened, allowed her to create this timeonomics model and actually be able to develop research around this challenge. So sort of she identified this problem, listening to her clients, and then she had access to these folks to do research, and of course much more broadly than just her own clients. This allowed her to write this book, The 24-Hour Customer, get on Fox News, et cetera, won a Small Business Book Award for her book. But really what it did was it shifted her consulting practice from being very general strategic consulting and big projects and companies similar to what she'd come from, to having a niche where now people knew to call her because she was the one who had that expertise. And I really want to say that this idea of understanding the trends in our industry as consultants, we have that ability to stand back, to listen, to convene in a way that gives us a real access to these trends. And that is what our clients look to us for. They want us to be saying, helping them see around corners, saying what's happening that is not just in one company, but might be happening more broadly. And if you don't have a lot of clients, you're out reading, you're going to conferences. You are that person who can help them in a way that they can't help themselves. So the now actually, just to close, she has actually got a nice column in Fast Company, so that's where you can read about her and find her online. So thinking to yourself, what are the roles you're going to play in your niche this year? Where can you actually be amplifying or convening, or the one who is helping to align folks to the trends that are coming? Step 3, let's jump into step 3. This is, I'm hoping as you're doing this, you've got some ideas, you're writing things down, like things that you could be doing differently this year. But I also hope you're coming up with your questions, because as we said, we're going to be giving away a book at the end for the first great question that we get, but I'm hoping to get a lot of them. Activate your advocates. This is step 3. This is a story I'm going to tell you is about Sarah Miller-Caldicott. Sarah Miller-Caldicott was, again, a consultant. She'd been a storied career in corporations and then started her own consulting practice. But unlike the rest of us, she actually is the great-grandniece of Edison. So how did she get started in really making a difference? I mean, probably there's a lot of relatives of Edison, but she really wanted to step out and be known for his, for championing his ideas and amplifying his ideas. But she couldn't get much of a traction just by being the great-grandniece of Thomas Edison. So she actually found a partner. And this chapter is all about partnering. How do we create advocates for our ideas? So she partnered with Michael Gelb, who's already written a number of books, and she created her first book on Innovate Like Edison, and that actually allowed her then the platform, to build her platform to create her own not only consulting practice around these ideas of Edison, but also to broaden it around innovation, and then create her second book on her own platform. Now, the reason I use her as an example is not because we're all related to Edison, but instead because we can all partner. We can also all find ways in which to find other voices that can amplify our message, to really understand that this isn't always about tooting our own horn or getting our own speaking opportunities, but instead potentially finding a partner where there's choices for others to be helping us spread the word about our ideas. And I want to encourage people to be thinking in this step about that step in the process of activating their advocates, getting people who really will believe in you, but also help you to build a much broader platform. So who could you partner with this year? This is a question to ask yourself. You know, how could you scale your impact this year? Is there an organization? Is there a trade association in your field? Is there a magazine that is well read that you could get a column at? Is there a place where you could be the speaker, which has already got a lot of places, but there's already a lot of traction for ideas that you care about? That is step 3, to finding those partnerships to amplify your message. Step 4 is about putting your eye on the line. Now, what do I mean by this? This chapter is really that sort of in-between moment which all of us have. And some of it is the first part of our journey, some of it's at the middle of our journey, some of it towards the end of our journey, in really putting ourselves on the line. It is about finding that inner strength to keep going when we have those dark nights of the soul, when we really can't keep going. And that, I'm going to come back to that chapter at the end because I think it's so critical, and I want to close on that. So let's move on to chapter 5. Chapter 5, I think, is the most important chapter for consultants, because this is the key component that we as consultants have the ability to do, which is to codify what we know in a way that allows others to follow our footsteps. So this chapter really is following some of the ideas from the book Switch, How to Make Change When Change is Hard. And it is this idea of the elephant and the rider. You know, the elephant is sort of a lazy part of us that doesn't really like to make change, and the rider is the one that's really pushing, let's go, let's go, let's go. And what they show in this book is that it is about showing that path forward to people, showing the bright possibilities for people in order to make change happen. So as consultants, we have this possibility of creating frameworks of our ideas, showing a path, showing a framework that allows others to follow what has worked in our industry. So if we are working with multiple clients, or we've created something that works, how can we showcase that in a way that others can understand it? This is a story of Michelle May, a doctor in Colorado, who, while she had a full-time practice, on the side she was struggling with eating issues, and she started teaching little workshops on the weekend to people on how do you be more mindful about food and how do you create more healthy habits. Now, it easily could have been just, hosting a few workshops, a brown bag lunch, a lot of ways in which we share our ideas. But instead, she really created a framework. So she created this mindful eating cycle model, which was very easy to understand, a crisp story that people could follow. And then she started teaching people that model. And she started teaching people that model in a way that allowed others to then go out and teach it. So she taught it in a way that was a train the trainers model. And for most consultants, we don't think this way initially. We think we have to be the one in front of our clients. But if we instead think, how could we scale our impact by actually getting others who are trained in our framework, that's when we really can become thought leaders. That's when we really can become somebody who is making a big impact in an industry. Now, again, we often feel like we don't have time, but a lot of it is spending those moments distilling our ideas into a framework. And this is another example of that is Chip Conley, the CEO of Joie de Vivre Hospitality. He's owned a chain of boutique hotels here in California that he started from one at the age of 26. And he went through what he called 2 once-in-a-lifetime downturns in 10 years out in California, between the dot-com crash and then 2008, the economic downturn. And he was able to keep his company going through thick and thin, and it was a lot of thin, as he described it. At the end of that journey, he realized that what he had done within his company is he had created a very unique framework for understanding how to treat people, how to treat his customers and his investors and employees equally. And he created, this is an image that he created of this model of how to do that for any company. And he went out and he started talking about it. Of course, he wrote a book, as was something he'd like to do. He's actually written a couple of different books. But the reason I'm sharing his story is because it was this model that allowed him to scale his impact. He can only run one company, but his ideas can now be adopted by multiple companies because he put them into a framework that others could understand. So I want you to think about this for yourself this year. Capturing this big idea, putting it into a framework so that others can see. So what is it you see from company to company, from client to client, that are some of the big ideas that are working, some of the best practices that are happening in each company? That's when we can be really impactful as consultants. That's when we really can have a seat at the table. It's when we can step back and look for and develop our frameworks, showcasing them in a new way. This is Sally Hogshead. She's got a wonderful book called Fascinate, 7 Triggers for How to Persuade and Capture People's Attention. And here's her model. Her model is all about the different triggers for getting people to be fascinated. But she created it in this beautiful handout that she gives out when she talks, and she uses wonderful words like prestige and alarm and mystique. And why do I say that's important? It's because we want to entice and fascinate people as we're developing our framework, making it memorable, making it stand out. So it isn't about the same old framework that everybody's used, but instead creating something that's a little bit fun or different or enticing. And I think she's a really great example. She particularly is a good example because she tells you that she did it wrong the first time. She came out with a book that nobody ever read. It was sort of a very deep tome with lots of research and whatever, but it didn't get anybody interested. So her second book, she really understood how important it was that, of course, she's writing about being fascinating, so she needed to be fascinating, but she also realized that making it memorable was critical. So this chapter of the book is really how to do that. And again, I'm going to give you some really good thinking on this in the book, some really step-by-step things that you can do. So what's the question I'm asking you? It's like, how can you tell a bigger story this year about the work that you're doing? This is one of the exercises that is in the book. It's called Juxtarose, and it's all about how to distill what you know, because you're probably sitting there thinking, oh yeah, this is great, Denise, but how do I do this? So I'm going to be giving you, this is another one of the worksheets that I'm going to be giving you after this webinar here. This is about how you get started, because most of us think the way we get started is to write down what does work, to write down what we know from all of our clients. Here's what you do, here's what you do, here's what you do. But the fact is that actually once we start focusing, as I learned from one of the people I interviewed, Sam Horn of the Intrigue Agency, we start with what does work. We get really into our head. And she advises that we start much better on the other side by starting with what doesn't work. So if we start there by identifying all the examples of things that we've seen our clients do wrong, or all the things that are not working in our industry or in our niche, that's when we can be compelling. So let me give you a quick example. When she and I were talking, and I use this example in the book, that she said, okay, Denise, pick something. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about business writing. She said, okay, talk about an example of something that doesn't work in business writing. And my brain immediately went to the story of a client that I had worked with before, who I'd done a 360 review for her. She's an executive coaching client. And her boss said, oh, whenever I get one of her emails, I go get a cup of coffee first because I know it's going to take me 20 minutes to read it, and I might as well have a cup of coffee. And I thought, wow, none of us want to be known as that person who writes a 20-minute email. But my Sam Horn says, well, actually what you want to call that is a cup of coffee email. So what I'm showing you here is that by writing the stories of exact examples of what doesn't work, we can come up with a unique way to say something that's already been said. Millions of people have said, don't write long emails. But if you can say, don't write a cup of coffee email, now it's more memorable. It's something you can own. It's your intellectual property. It's your example. Now, that's a very, very simple example. Of course, you want to get a little deeper than that. But in the book, I talk with you about how to do that, how to think about what doesn't work in your industry, and then you add the what does work. So there's one of the worksheets you're going to get is how to walk yourself through thinking about what you know. All right, Chapter 6. You'll be happy to know there's only 7 chapters, so we've got 2 more to go. Chapter 6 is about putting yourself on shout, and this is really a critical component as consultants. The main point in this chapter that I want to focus on is this idea about being discoverable. It is absolutely critical that we are able to be found. Now, what do I mean by found? Of course, it's Googleable, but it's more than Googleable. I mean, of course, I want you to be somebody that somebody can actually find on the web, but I want you to be found for your expertise. I think of LinkedIn as sort of a key place to go do that. There's also a great company called Expert File that has some really good tools in this area. But you want to be known for what you're known for. In other words, I want you to be showcasing the talks that you've given or the blogs that you've written on, and I want you to be discoverable in places where people are going to find someone like you. Thinking about the ratio of the number of times people look for someone with your expertise and the percentage that they find you, and raise that percentage this year. Maybe you need to get nominated for an award in your community or in your niche. Maybe you need to be out speaking or writing more. And don't just write on your own blog. Think about being a guest blogger somewhere where there's already traffic happening. That's when you're more discoverable. You want to be someone that is the person that people identify when they're looking for someone like you. And this chapter is really tons and tons of ideas about how to do this, both social media, writing, speaking, convening, all the different ways in which you can do this, whether you're just getting started or whether you're moving much further in your career, and some of the bigger ideas on how to make an impact. Of course, writing a book could be one of them, and having just done that journey, I know that's certainly a way to make yourself discoverable, but there is many, many, many other steps you can take. All right, last chapter is about inciting revolution or evolution. And I was very careful in choosing this chapter's title because I do think some of us are trying to institute evolutionary change while others are trying to institute revolutions, big, big changes. But let me tell you the story of Avinash Kaushik. Many of you may know him, especially if you're in Silicon Valley. He was actually at Intuit when he started his journey to be a thought leader. And he was the head of a team of 1 in Intuit in search engine optimization. Now, this was 2005, 2006, and he went out and he spoke at a local conference, and he talked to people about some of the things that they were trying to get to happen in their company. And 2 guys came up to him after and they said, hey, have you ever thought about sharing your expertise in a blog? And he went to him, just went back to that point we made earlier. He immediately thought, how could I possibly do that? I have 2 small children. I'm extremely busy. I cannot possibly start a blog. But he thought, okay, well, let's just do a little homework. And he started reading the blogs that were out there, and as he said, there was hundreds of them. But what he realized is that he had a unique perspective. He had a unique point of view, and that was really around this idea of really a person who is doing it every single day. He was doing search engine optimization tasks in his company and getting a lot of pushback. So he started a blog, and he called it Occam's Razor, and the blog became something he wrote 2 or 3 nights a week. You know, he did it probably at 11 o'clock at night, as he said, and didn't try to do it every day, and didn't try to write tons and tons of stuff. He said what he thought about every day was about adding value. What was the value he could add to the conversation? And I want you to be thinking about that yourself. What is the value you could add to the conversation? And then he began to get emails from, in his case, from Wiley Press, and they asked him to put his blogs into a book. So he made an agreement with his wife. He'd go on Saturday morning and he'd compile his blog posts. He had to write 50% more content. He wrote 2 books over the last 5 years. In that process, he has made $250,000 on his books. Now, again, not all of us are going to have that kind of success, but he donated every penny of that money, and he and his wife have had such a huge impact as a result. And he really talked about this idea that it was by adding value that he started to have this incredible following. He's got hundreds of thousands of people on Google and Twitter who are following him. But he got all that pales in comparison to this evolutionary change and that he's been able to bring about in his own industry. He gets love notes from people around the world who have adopted search engine optimization as their career choice and been able to take some of his ideas. He's now been headhunted to Google. He started a company on the side to sort of teach people more about what he knows. And what he's realized is that this ability to have that impact, evolutionary or revolutionary, is what really matters. He said those love notes now come every day from people saying, you've really changed my life. You've really given me so much knowledge and information. So I love to use that example because I do think that we all have an ability to add value in our industry or in our niche. We have ways that we could be making impact, and I want to invite each of you to be thinking about what that might look like this year for you. So what is required? How are you going to do this? You know, this going back to that point that I started with a couple of minutes ago about putting your eye on the line. This is not always for the faint of heart to go from leader to thought leader. It doesn't happen overnight. It can take years, and it is something that takes some time. So what keeps you going? I always love to share this one picture. You know, here you are. You wake up in the morning and you imagine to yourself, are you looking in the mirror in the morning and are you seeing a little kitten looking back at you, your tiny self, or are you seeing this lion, this sort of this really powerful part of yourself that says, I can do anything? It's so important for any of us as leaders or as thought leaders, as consultants or as influencers in our community to be nurturing that inner lion, to really be the one who is saying, I need some help around me. And that might look like a lot of different things. It might be a personal board of directors. It might be a buddy. It might be another champion. It might be another consultant who's working on the same journey as you are. But I want you to imagine what are some ways in which you could nurture your inner lion. You know, the companies that we work with are often have big boards of directors, and those are the people that guide them. But imagine that you yourself could have a personal board of directors, people around you that are someone you gather with on a regular basis or that you call to test your ideas with, someone who's going to say, yes, you absolutely could be codifying your lessons learned. You could be convening in your community. You could be a speaker or a writer. Those are the steps. But also I think that thought leadership is, most importantly, about being, not about being known. It is about being known for making a difference. And I want to leave you with that thought more than any other in this year. This is not about just being the person that everybody talks about, but instead about being somebody who's made a difference in your industry or your community or in your companies that you work with or even within your own organization. This is really when you're a real thought leader, it's when you've made that big difference. So I want to invite you to just take a couple steps. First of all, ask some questions. We're going to jump to the questions now because we've got about 15 more minutes. But I want to invite you to think about how do you make yourself more discoverable this year? How do you help your clients be more discoverable? What can you do to suit their board, showcase some of their best practices and some other things that are working? And then I can help you scale your impact and influence. I hope you'll be in touch with me. I'd really love to work with leaders who are becoming thought leaders. If you think you have some expertise you want to codify, a book you want to write, you want to get out there, if there's ways I can help you, on the screen, Denise at thoughtleadershiplab.com. I hope you'll be in touch. And then in the next week or so, we will be sending you a copy of this, and we will send you some of those worksheets that I mentioned. So I hope you'll follow along and see some of the exercises. But let's jump now, if we can, to maybe if you'll take it away, and maybe we can do some questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Denise. That was a great presentation. We have some really good questions, so we're just going to go ahead and get started with them. Like Denise said, we are going to email you a copy of the presentation and the recording, and we're also going to pass along a thought leadership guide. So I'll be sending that out to you guys next week. So let's jump to the questions. All right. So we have one from Michael. He says, can people be thought leaders before they become change agents? Deep thinkers, but not necessarily earth movers.
Well, I think as consultants, we have a unique ability to actually be thought leaders without actually being the ones implementing the change, because we often have a seat at the table and we're helping our clients make change. And so we are surrounding ourselves and encouraging and actually equipping others to make change, even if we're not the change agents ourselves. So I think of us as potentially one step removed. So my client, Bonton Quinlivan, I consulted with her for 3 years. I was not the one leading the program, but as a result of having that seat at the table and helping make that change happen, I was able to help her to really be that change agent and thought leader in the world. So I don't think that we always have to be the one making the change, but as consultants, we have that seat that allows us to help others to be those amplifiers and those thought leaders themselves.
Okay, wonderful. The next question, how can I use content to be a thought leader if I'm not a natural writer?
I would say get yourself a good editor because, we're not all natural writers. And the good news is there's a lot of people on TaskRabbit or on some of these other resources that we can hire to help us. The one thing that I will say is writing a good outline is the critical component. What are the 3 points you want to make? Then what are the 3 ideas under each point that support that? What is it? Maybe it's a quote. Maybe it's an example of a client you've worked with. Maybe it's something that you've learned from your own career. So if you can think of 3 points under each initial point, that is a great outline. So 3 key points I want to make, 3 supporting ideas under them, then write from that. I think that we can be far more compelling. The other thing to realize is that, it's 7 points, 5 ideas. You don't have to write 100 different things. Think of distill down to some critical components, and then find somebody to be your line editor or who can reframe something. Personally, I think the New York Times could use a few more editors, so I don't think the bar needs to be super high. I think you need to be able to be getting your point across, being uncomplexifying, demystifying. That is really our critical role.
Right. And Denise, piggybacking on that, we have another question kind of in the same context. It says, it seems that thought leadership is founded on writing a book. Is that the only way? And if so, if you don't want to write a book, can you still be an industry thought leader?
Absolutely. And I was thinking about that as I was going through this. I used a lot of examples of people who wrote books, and I do not think you have to write a book. Anton Quinlivan, the guy, Gangster Gardner, neither of them have written books. Thinking even back to this, I was thinking this morning about the woman who started MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. She didn't write a book. She started a movement. And I do think that there's many, many, many ways in which people can be hugely impactful without ever writing a book. And I don't, personally, unless you really want to, I don't recommend it. It takes a lot of, what is it, my book coach called it, she called it bum glue. Glue your bum to the seat for a lot of weeks in order to get a book done. And that is not for the faint of heart. I will say that launching a book is way more fun than writing a book, so I would recommend you think about it, but no, it is not required. I think sharing your ideas, being a convener, being an amplifier, being somebody who can curate the best information, those are all roles as consultants that require no book writing at all. But instead, being somebody who's paying attention, understanding and tracking the trends, and then helping others to understand and distill that knowledge that they need, that is really, really critical, and that's a role we can all play.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay. As a business generalist, how can I pursue thought leadership by a strategy of owning my vertical when my professional experience is across 8 industry verticals and my functional experience is across 5 business functions?
Wow, not a bad, shabby background there.
Right.
Right? So there's not one way to do that. There's not one answer to that question. What I would say is, what gets you the most excited, and start there. So if, for example, you frequently get called for a certain challenge that a company is facing. So maybe you work across multiple verticals and even multiple niches within those verticals, but maybe there's a specific challenge that you're often called, like the company's facing a big reorganization, or so that you're really good at making change happen, or maybe they have a product that's already late and you're the one who gets called in that situation. So instead of thinking about it from an expertise vertically, maybe thinking about an expertise horizontally, where you're often the one called. Maybe you're very good at strategic communication. Maybe you're very good at seeing the future if you're a futurist. And taking that framework. That's one idea. The second idea might be, instead of worrying so much about being known in everything, pick 1 or 2 where having influence and impact and a platform in those 1 or 2 is going to help across all. And, I always say to people, you don't need to hold yourself back because you have multiple expertise and you don't want to just get people confused by having a niche in one and now they're never going to call you in another area. I think that's actually a misnomer. I think what people really want is someone who has developed a platform, somebody who has gotten that seat at the table and has been the one who has shown the way forward in whatever particular arena. Now that you're just kind of noted as a thought leader, and it's not so much, oh, he only knows or she only knows something in that one particular niche, but instead you've built credibility and influence, and now you actually have much more likely a seat at a bigger table and more people who want to have you develop expertise or share your ideas in their field. So I will tell you that Robin Chase of Zipcar, here she is, the founder of a car sharing company. Then she became a thought leader in transportation locally, regionally, then nationally, now internationally. But she keeps broadening. She's gone from being a thought leader in transportation to working on global warming, and now she's working on something she calls Peers Inc., which is all about how sharing economy is going to change the world. So I think you can be a thought leader in a lot of different arenas, and it doesn't have to be just one.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we have a few more questions, and just to let you know, guys, if we don't get to the questions that you have, we'll make sure that Denise gets back to you with an answer. So we have time for a few more. All right. Although I think I have a niche to develop, I find the current thought leaders in my field to be a little intimidating to go up against. Suggestions for vote of confidence to unseat current leaders?
Do we need to unseat them? That's the first question I would ask that person. I don't know that we need to unseat them, nor do I think that's even possible. I think that there's lots of room, and what we know is, I'll tell you a little story. I think that's the best answer to that question. I was at a conference with the National Speakers Association. So I'm in a room with hundreds and thousands of fabulous speakers, and so you can get a little intimidated. You can think, these people have been speaking for 20 years, I've only been speaking for 5, and these people are already speaking on leadership, and I'm speaking on leadership, what more is there to say? So I went to one of the sessions at this conference, and this guy who, a long-time trainer of speakers says at the end of his talk, he's got it was a whole day session. It was sort of the pre-session of the conference. And this whole day session at the end, he shares one story that has really stuck with me. He said, I really want to thank everyone in the room here. 50, 60 speakers. And I was thinking, why is he thanking us? He just gave a full day talk. And he said, because when I get up on stage, he said, there's so many times in which I might get up on a stage, say the same thing day 1 and the same thing day 2. And on day 1, no one will come up to me afterwards. And on day 2, 5 people will come up to me afterwards and I'll say, thank you. What you said just so impacted my life. I really appreciate it. And he said, I realized that over time, people often need to hear things, I think his number was 80 times before it actually impacts them. There's a certain time in someone's life they need to hear it, or a certain problem that they're facing at that moment that message actually impacted. And he said, I really want to thank all the people who are 1 through 79 so that someday I'm number 80 for 5 people in the room. So when I think to myself about all these people who are already experts in our field, People need to hear information multiple times, and sometimes your way of saying it, sometimes your point of view, sometimes just the timing or when they read it or where they read it was the time that got through to them. So I really want to invite you to not think about those other people, but to imagine that you are one of the 79 who people need to hear from, and they need to hear it in whatever column, in whatever location you're speaking, in whatever way in which you present it. You're going to have an impact on some people, and to me, that is everything. When I get people saying to me at the end of a talk or reading something that I've read, or gosh, it's been so wonderful since the book came out, sending me love notes or writing an Amazon review and saying how they love my book, that's the impact I'm hoping to have, and I think you can have that impact too, regardless of how many people have written or talked or established themselves in your field.
That's a really great point, Denise. Okay, how can I find out who the influence leaders are in my field?
Get online. One of the things I would start with is going on LinkedIn and going to the influencers category there. They're not taking more people now, but you can find influencers just from that, finding your niche influencers. Second thing I would go do is get on Twitter and figure out what are the hashtags that people are talking about what you're talking about. Is it innovation? Is it change? Is it whatever field you're a consultant in? Figure out what some of the key phrases are that people are tweeting, and start to figure out who are the ones who you hear from on a regular basis, and start following them. I recommend in the book that you find the 20, 30, 40 different people that are the influencers in your field, and those are the ones that you should follow for a while. Start seeing what people are talking about. See when they get retweeted, what is it that they're saying. And then go look at the conferences in your niche. Who are the key speakers? Who are the ones who are regularly invited to speak? In entrepreneurship, the reason I got Guy Kawasaki to write my foreword is because I'm from the world of entrepreneurship, and Guy Kawasaki speaks at every conference. He also was kind enough to give me my first office space for 2 years for free in downtown Palo Alto when I started my nonprofit. So of course I went to him because I admire the guy and he's written a number of books, but also because he was the one that everybody called in that niche of entrepreneurship. And so who is it in your niche that people always call? And then figure out if they're following other people, who might they be on the dais with when they're speaking on a panel, or who are the people who speak after or before them. Those are the influencers. And by the way, we should be on those stages too. Especially I'm speaking to my women colleagues, because I think we often think that somebody else has more expertise. I believe that you have enough. And if you're being hired as a consultant, you're already seen as somebody who has the expertise necessary. Get out there and write and speak and be the one who is sharing your knowledge and expertise. Don't wait for another degree or someone else to tell you you're smart enough or capable enough. You are capable enough.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. How do I market myself as a thought leader without the self-title?
Without the what?
Without the self-title? So I'm assuming that probably means how do I market myself as a thought leader without actually having the title of a thought leader?
Without having the title of being a thought leader.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't think you ever give yourself that title. I think other people give you that title as a thought leader, and you don't need to have the title in order to get going here. And it will often be a while before someone will say you're the thought leader. The thought leader is someone who is the go-to person, but you're not the go-to person until you get started. So I just say get out there and start, whatever it looks like, whether it be, and in my book I give you tons of ideas of ways to get started, because I know it can be intimidating. But is there, in our community, for example, there's women in consulting, and so figuring out what you care about and doing a little event there where you're speaking on your topic. You get 20 people to show up, you get 10 people to show up. If you're in an organization, hosting a brown bag lunch on something that you care about. What we call, in the book I talk about something that one of my folks that I interviewed shared with me. She said, play the small venues first. The great comedians don't go to speak in front of 5,000 people. They don't write the book thousands of reading. They really want to start and play the small venues first. Figure out what is your messages resonating, what do people get excited about, ask you about, and then you follow up on that and keep doing more of that. With my book, I started teaching it as a workshop, a conference, and that was where I learned what people paid attention to, what people wanted to know more about, and I kept honing it over a couple of years. I started to find as many opportunities as I can to share this with my clients. Over time, that's when I honed it down to the 7 steps. It didn't happen one day all magically.
Well, sounds like I'm going to have to get a copy of your book, Denise.
I hope so.
Right, right. Well, so we're just about out of time. For those of you who have questions we weren't able to get to, we will make sure we get responses to you over email. So thank you for sending those in. And Denise, we really appreciate your time being here.
Thank you. Who was our winner?
You know, we actually were going to offline try and see who wrote in first. I was reading questions out of order, so yeah. So we'll go ahead and email the winner and let you guys know.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming on, and I know this is the opportunity here to get out there and share your ideas with the world. That's what I'm inviting you all to.
Right. Exactly. Great advice. All right. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Take care.